Luis told me they were doing a bumper and that it was 30 seconds long. And I asked him if I looked that feeble, that it would take me 30 seconds to get on the stage. He said, "You never know." If you can't tell, we've gone full-blown Christmas already. And from music to decorations to us heading to a big service on the 23rd. You're going to get a card that has a Christmas offering on one side and our Christmas Eve early service on the other side. It's just like it sounds. It's one day ahead of Christmas Eve. So we do our Christmas Eve service on the 23rd. We have a lot of volunteers and staff who put a lot of energy and time into this ministry, and it blesses them to do that service, but then they also get to be with their families. And so what you need to know, though, is we have so many people who attend those services that you'll need to sign up. So get on the app, and we're going to ask you to sign up because we don't have enough chairs to seat everybody at one service. So once one service is filled, then we'll ask you to come to the second service. It'll be great, and I hope you'll be involved all month with us as we prepare for that. We're starting the Christmas series with a quiz. It's okay. It won't impact your GPA. In fact, if you fail this test, you may win at the human race, okay? What I'm going to do is I'm going to put some words on the screen. And I'm going to give you just a few seconds. You can't take long, but you can take a little time to talk to the person next to you, and you have to determine if you think somebody was given that as a name or if I'm just messing with you. Okay? All right? You know the rules. And by the way, I'm going to find out what you think by asking for applause. So the more people who participate, the better the illustration will be. But if I say, if you think it's a name, you can make any noise, clap, cheer, whatever, and then not a name, okay? Here's the first one. Denim. Is this a name or simply a material that you wear? Go ahead, you have just a few seconds. What do you think? What do you think? Okay. How many think it's a name? How many say, "No way, that's not a name"? Oh, okay. This is a name. Yeah, it was given to a girl, okay? Let's up the ante. Let's go with audio science. Is this a name, or is this simply a streaming science textbook? I'll give you a few seconds to figure this one out. Oh, there's perplexity. I can hear it in the room. How many of you would say, "Not a name"? That is not a name. How many of you think name? There's a few of you, and you are rewarded. This is a name. This was a name given to somebody because the parents were listening to an audio science textbook. Yes. Okay. Oh, there's more. How about felony? Is this a name, or is this simply evidence that I need spell check in my life? What do you think? What do you think? Okay, how many think that's a name? How many think no? Oh, it's a name. Okay, the next one. I'm not going to pronounce it. You can figure it out yourself. Did some human being give this as a name to another human being? Or am I just getting under your skin? I'm going to let you take your time on this one. I don't want you to be rash. Sorry, did that chafe? Okay. Okay, how many of you say not a name? How many of you say name? This is not a name. Yeah, I made it up, but to be fair, let's be honest here. I can't tell you for sure if it's not a name because there was no way in the world I was going to Google search that. The images that could come up, you can't unsee, right? So I'm pretty sure it's not a name, but I can't be 100%, right? Here's the last one. Moon unit. You have to decide with this name if I'm crazy enough to come up with two words that don't mean anything to each other, or if parents were willing to do that. Moon unit. Give it a thought. There's some perplexity here, too. How many of you think that's a name? Wow. Wow, rousing. How many? No, not a name. Yeah, sorry, it's a name. It's what? Yes, it's actually a famous person, which makes sense. They've lost their mind. Right? Now, the question I have is what is going on in our culture with names? It is so weird out there that most of you believe that Butt-Raz was a possible name for a kid. Right? We used to look through books that had names and meanings with them, and we would take some time to do that. I think this is what's happening right now. I think there's two pieces of criteria for naming. Do I like it? Do I think it's cool? I don't think there's any further reasoning beyond that. If somebody likes something and they think that it sounds cool, they're going to go with it. And that's what you see happening. This would never happen in the ancient world. The ancient world took names very seriously. They were given out for a couple reasons. One, because of its meaning, or because it had connection to the family in some way, and often it was both. It had some deep meaning, and it was rooted in the family somewhere along the line, and you would give that. They didn't do cool. You weren't giving out Zerubbabel because it was a cool-sounding name, right? You gave that name out because it had some purpose, some meaning, some depth to it. Now, here's why I'm telling you this. There's a few things we know about the naming process in the ancient world. We knew it was serious, and we also know that the responsibility was fully on the father. The father was the one who gave the name. That kid would be saddled with a name that had meaning, and he would be identified by his name and his father's name. Joseph, son of Jacob. Both of the names carried weight. And so they didn't play around with this. They gave out these names with deep, deep intention. Now, the reason I'm telling you this is because earlier in the year, I'm reading through the Christmas story, which I do every year because I know we're going to talk about it. It's such an important story that we'll talk about it every year. And the problem is we get dull to the story. We've heard it so many times. It's been there, done that sort of attitudes that we have toward it. And so I go to it hoping that maybe as I read it with curious eyes, that the Holy Spirit will put something under my skin and will irritate something. And I'll pay attention to it. And then maybe we'll find a different layer of the story that we can use to understand God's deep love for us, the depth of his love, right? So that's what I was doing. I was reading, and I came across something that I've known it's been there forever. There was some naming happening in the story. And 2 times in the story, the naming of somebody deviated from the norm that you would have expected in their culture. And I started asking myself, why in the world would that happen? There was nothing wrong with the way they were doing it. In fact, there's some beauty for the way that they chose to do that. But there was clear deviation. And it wasn't just that it was deviation and nobody noticed. People were also up in arms about it, like, and shouldn't be doing this. And so I had to ask myself, God doesn't do anything without intent. There's something he's doing here on purpose for some grander goal. And so I started kind of digging into it, and I think over the course of the next month, we're going to bring some stuff to you that I think is pretty cool. It's been in the story the whole time. It's just been underneath the surface where you kind of just read over it, and you don't even know that there's deep meaning there. So I want to take you to the first place this happens in the story. This is in Luke chapter 1. This is before Jesus shows up. This is before we ever hear about him being told to marry. This is a couple, Zachariah and Elizabeth, who have longed for a child and still don't have one. And they're told, hey, good news has come your way. You're about to have a child. And what the scriptures reveal is it sounds like Zechariah is a pretty polite guy. Check this out. This is the second half of 18, chapter 1. He's questioning, how is this possible? I am old, and my wife is well along in years. This is 2,000 years ago, but times have not changed. He is standing in the Holy of Holies, having a personal conversation with an angel. Nobody else is around. There's no way she's ever going to hear, oh, I think she's old, right? But he's like, it could get back to her. She's well along in years. He's smart, right? He's smart, he's polite. It's unfortunate that level of politeness didn't include everybody. Because look at the front half of verse 18. Again, he's responding to this angel who's told him this good news about having a baby. And he asked the angel, how can I be sure of this? Polite to his wife, kind to his wife, insulting to God and his messenger. I don't know if I can trust you. I don't know if I can believe you. I'm going to need a sign before I toss in with you at all. You want a sign? How about verse 20? And now you will be silent and not able to speak until the day this happens. I know this might seem harsh, like he loses his voice. But think about this. He has an angel of God standing before him delivering this message. Do you know how many people in history have had that opportunity? So few. And yet they have trusted and followed God in so many ways. He has a messenger of God before him, and he's having a hard time believing it. Maybe put yourself in his shoes for just a minute. Why is he having a hard time in believing? He's already said it. She's well along in years. What does that mean? Nobody knows. Nobody knows. If people are guessing, she's in her 60s, is what they think. Can I tell you, my wife and I are 57 years old, and if somebody came and told us that Tracy was pregnant, there would be a lot of disbelief in our house for days. Like, people make jokes about it on occasion that she's pregnant. We don't laugh. We don't think it's funny. Like, there's nothing funny about that. Like, find something else to talk about. So I think I have a kind of an understanding. Like, what you're asking for, what you're telling me is going to happen, doesn't just seem improbable. It seems impossible. And so he has some doubt. Now, here's what we know from the text. We know a few things. One, we know that they had prayed about having a baby for quite some time. I also think it's clear, this is the second thing that we know, that at some point they stopped praying. Why do I draw that conclusion? Because when he's told you're going to have a child, he doesn't say, oh, finally, we've been praying about this the whole time. He doesn't say that. He says, we've aged out. This isn't possible for us. We stopped praying for this when we knew it wasn't going to be possible. You missed the boat, God. Your timing was off. You got this wrong. And somewhere, I don't know, 10 years, maybe longer, this hadn't been a prayer that had left their lips. And they've given up on this for quite some time. There's a third thing we know. She gets pregnant. In fact, in verse 24, it says, she goes into seclusion, which I think makes a ton of sense. They're having a hard time buying this. Can you imagine sharing that with your neighbors? Elizabeth, you're putting on a little weight. What's going on here? Yeah, I'm pregnant. Sure you are. Lay off the bread, honey, right? So they're going to say, like, I doubt it. I seriously don't believe this. And so she's in seclusion. And I wonder if that seclusion was also allowing her to experience and just thoroughly enjoy all these things that she had longed for all those years. Like her body's changing. She's going to feel that baby kick. She's dreaming about all the things that she's going to be able to do with this miracle baby. This is an incredible time for her. And she's looking forward. He can't talk. That baby's name is going to cross her lips for the first time. She's going to be the one who says it. So she's looking forward to all of this. But here's the thing. Back in verse 13, God hijacks the naming of the kid. It's not going to be done by Zechariah or Elizabeth. This is verse 13. The angel said, "Don't be afraid, Zechariah. Your prayers have been heard." We're going to get to that. "Your wife Elizabeth will bear you a son. You are to call him John." This was originally said in Hebrew, translated into Greek, translated into English. If you would go directly from Hebrew into English, it would say, "Call him John." This is clear, it's concise, it's directive. There's no chance that you're going to find a way to slip in a family name or family heritage. This is his name, period. That's what's going to happen here. This is interesting because at this point in the story, Zechariah has showed no amount of disbelief, and yet he's still losing the privilege of naming that child. So something's going on. And listen, God didn't say, "I want you to name him Moon Unit." But you need to understand that it's in the same category. These people would have responded the same way to the name that they were proposing to give to this child. And if you doubt me, let me show you how this goes down. This is verse 59 of chapter 1. "On the 8th day, they came to circumcise the child, which is also the day they would give the name to the child. And they were going to name him after his father, Zechariah." Of course they were. Of course they were. It's an honoring name. It's a family name. It's all the things that you would expect that would happen in this culture. And he can't talk, so they know what to do. They're going to give him a proper name. Oh, and then verse 60, she speaks up. Elizabeth says, "No, he is to be called John." Whoa. Know your place, woman. Like, that might sound like I'm being an idiot, but that is exactly what happens. Listen to verse 62. "Then they made signs to his father to find out what he would like to name the child." Why? Listen, it's a different culture. You don't have to like it, but you have to understand it. And in this culture, the dad had the responsibility of giving the name. And it didn't matter that somehow they had worked out some agreement on the name, which, by the way, clearly they had. When Tracy and I, we would argue about names for a while, and finally we came up with a way to settle it. I would name the boys, she would name the girls. And it started to seem unfair when we kept having boys, right? An agreement's an agreement. That's the way I see it. But here's the truth. Here's the truth. Every name that we picked, we were in agreement on. If one of us would have said, oh, you can't do that, please don't choose that name, we would have listened. We would have done that. They have this agreement with each other. They've talked. They've done the work of doing that because he's been communicating this miraculous thing to her. But they still want him to speak. He can't, so he writes, his name is John. In verse 64, immediately his mouth was opened, his tongue set free, and he began to speak, praising God. Immediately, the things out of his mouth are how good God is, how great God was to them, how gracious he was. And I think this has to do partly with the name that was given, and we're going to get to that, but I want you to see the response of the people to all of this. This is verse 66 of chapter 1 of Luke. They say, "What then is this child going to be? For the Lord's hand is with him." Now, I think they're saying this for two reasons. One, clearly a miracle. Zechariah is talking again. He's praising God. This is lending some credence to an energy and buzz in the room that would have just been, it would have been electric, right? But the other thing that was happening is they just gave this baby a name that wasn't a family name, that was this. This is what John means. Jehovah is a gracious giver. Jehovah is a gracious giver. And it left these people pondering, oh, what is this child going to be used for? Now I think when I see this name that's been given, that was given by God, that's not a family name, that was out in left field for this family, I think there might be three reasons that this happened. There's probably more. There's three reasons that I have to talk about this morning. One, I think it's pretty clear that what God wanted to do was he wanted to grab attention. It grabbed the attention of everybody who was involved. I don't know if you know this or not, but John was an actual Jewish name that was common. It was a pretty common name. But because it's not part of their family heritage, it was shocking, and it would have been shocking for him to have that name. Nobody would have understood it. Everybody who's related, connected to the family, would have been, what is happening here? Why are they doing this? And that appeal, that shock, was meant to grab people's attention. In fact, it got them to wonder about God's hand being on John, which is incredible because as John gets older and he starts his ministry, they would have remembered this very idea, and God would have had their attention. Mission accomplished. If you just simply gave him the name to grab attention, mission accomplished. But I think there might have been more. I think there's another reason. I think this name spoke to the family. I really do believe that Zechariah and Elizabeth gave up praying years earlier. But despite that, God had placed the memory or that request in his heart, and he had carried that for years with a plan. They didn't know the plan. They were unaware of it, but God was aware of it. And I want you to show you something in the names of the people in that family. Okay, I think this is pretty cool. Zechariah, his name means Yahweh remembers. Now, I want to be careful here because remembers in our culture means that you forgot something and then recalled it later. That does not happen to God. Maybe a good way to translate this would be favored by God, but it's that sort of thing where you've asked for this and you've forgotten about it, but God hasn't. He's going to visit this favor on you. That's Zechariah's name. Yahweh remembers. Elizabeth's name, oath of God. Oath of God. Yahweh remembers the oath of God. And what is the result? Yahweh, Jehovah, is a gracious giver. It's pretty cool. It actually works with the big story of Jesus coming, right? I promised the Messiah. I've remembered that. I'm remembering my oath. And when I deliver on the Messiah, who's going to come? A gracious giver. That's who's going to come. But it works for this family too. This family who longed for years to have a child and never, ever did. And in fact, the scriptures kind of address this. It's very interesting. In verse 14 of Luke chapter 1, he says, he, John, will be a joy and a delight to you. He was specifically being given to this family so that they would have joy and delight. Why? Because God is a gracious giver. Did they earn it? Did they deserve it? See, this is the thing that happens in our culture with so many things. We long for God to act. And we think if God doesn't act on our timing in the way that we want him to act, that there must be something wrong with him. And maybe then I can withdraw my faith or belief in him. Maybe I shouldn't trust you. Maybe I should look for a sign. When in fact the truth is this: anything that God does on your behalf at all is gracious, period, every time. You don't deserve it. We don't earn it. There's nothing like that that's happened where God's got in this cruel system and he's like, man, I really got to pay them out. No. In every case, it's grace. It's favor that you didn't earn, that you're not due. And in this case, he gave that to this family. So I think he spoke to the family, but I think he didn't just speak to the family, he spoke through the family, because this same message was meant to be communicated to all of mankind. See, right after the family is told, this is going to be a joy for you, this is going to be something that fills your hearts, this is what is said about this guy, John. This is verse 16 and 17, partial 17. He will bring back many of the people of Israel to the Lord their God, to make ready a people prepared for the Lord. John's whole purpose in his life was to come to prepare people for the coming of Jesus. He had a mission, he had a purpose. And oddly enough, I just find this utterly interesting. I think he did have a family name. He had a family name from the Almighty God of the universe, who said, you know what? You're going to be able to identify what he's doing because he's connected to me, and he's going to point a way to my son. And the messenger that I'm going to send to you to turn your hearts back to God, if you've wondered who I am, if you've wondered what I'm about, if you wondered what's going on in the world, just look at his name, because I've embedded the message right in it. Jehovah is a gracious giver. That's my messenger. That's who it is that will carry the message before you see the gift I'm about to give in my son. This is a big deal. This name had purpose and meaning, and it seems to come out of left field, but it has all of this depth of purpose, not just for the family, but for you and I. That God wanted to make sure that you understood he's a gracious giver. You know, there's a lot of talk, and I have no problem with it. There's a lot of talk about judgment. Because at the end of the day, when we all die, we will stand before God and we will have to give an account of our lives. And it's not going to be pretty. We're going to be embarrassed that the stuff that we thought, the motives that we had, the words that left our mouth are going to be revealed and out in the open for everybody to see. And God is going to judge at that time. But my friends, listen carefully. If you've ever longed for mercy and grace It is found in the person of Jesus. And John was sent to point you to that. In fact, he carried the message himself. Jehovah is a gracious giver. It's his character. And if you would throw yourself on that, that grace will carry you through life. As you think about this Christmas story and you hear the name John, and you recall what John the Baptist would go and do, may you remember that he was communicating to the world that Jehovah was a gracious giver. But may it be something that you just, don't let it be something that you know. Cling to it. Because that God who met that family and set the forerunner to the nation of Israel is the same gracious giver who pursues your heart. God is a gracious giver. May we remember that this Christmas. Can I pray? God, I'm so grateful you love us in a way that we cannot fully understand. For you to send your Son in an act of grace is unbelievable. But to be reminded in the story, too, that even in moments when we've prayed for things and we've given up because we've got frustrated or we think, man, this is just timed out, it just cannot happen, that you still hold these things in your heart. And that when you can, when it makes sense for your kingdom, you'll act on the character that you have, and that is of a gracious giver. God, all that we have has been given to us, and we don't deserve it. We've not earned it. It's all a gift. And I ask as we go into Christmas thinking about all the things that we want or what we need to buy other people and all the rushing around, that we would find these moments to rest and settle and to remember that at the core of this story is a message that you wanted mankind to get. You are a gracious giver who loves us and has given us so much. May we respond with gratefulness. May we respond the way Zechariah did. May we open our mouths and praise because of how good you are. We love you. Thank you for these beautiful reminders of who you are and how it impacts our lives. In Jesus' name.